Welcome to another episode of the Thoughts with Lakshman podcast. This is episode 28, and we're going to be talking about gender inequality across Europe. In the last episode, we discussed gender inequality in the Middle East, and we spoke about the need for more U.S. intervention to help out with feminist organizations and civil rights organizations, and not just the U.S., but other countries too. And I also wanted to educate you guys on what's going on. And I hope you've done more reading since that last episode because it's a crucial topic. It's very important. Um, in this episode, we're going to be looking at gender inequality across Europe. There's definitely more equality in Europe compared to the Middle East, but again, there's not full equality, and that's not good enough. I upload two main series on my YouTube channel, my Learning German series and my podcast. If you're interested, you can check both of those out. My Learning German series is basically a walkthrough with German, my own videos on learning German as a language. I started off at a pretty basic level in terms of vocabulary, and I've worked up with the grammar. I've also, like I said, got my podcast, and I use the Anchor app, which is incredible. And I upload my podcast, allows me to upload my podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcast, and I also do it on YouTube using Screencastify's. But yeah, let's get straight into it. And my name is Lakshman Sybil. I'm a junior at the Edgemont Junior Senior High School, and I've been working with German for about a year and a half now. So yeah, let's get into it. So with gender inequality across Europe, there is near an enemy in each of the major countries that, it's important for women to have the same rights as men. I pulled up a study. I did some research. I found a study. Um, High 90s, 97, 98, 99% of people believe that gender inequality is important. Interestingly enough, in Russia and Ukraine, it's 89%. It's very interesting. But, in Sweden, Netherlands, France, Germany, Greece, Spain, the UK, even Hungary, they all hold that view. And, although most, you know, pe- people think that, men and women having equal rights is important, the strength of this sentiment varies across the countries in Europe. At least 9 to 10 believe gender equality is very important. By comparison, 7 in 10 in Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, and Poland say it's very important for women to have the same rights. And, Russia, for example, and Ukraine, more than half of this country believe gender equality is very important. Um, Additionally, since the fall of communism, women's rights have improved dramatically in many countries. Um, the percent of women who now have social and legal rights is much, much more than what they did under communism. In former Eastern Bloc nations, at least 4 in 10 in each country say women have more social and legal rights now than they had under communism. Sorry about that. And after regime changes, the dramatic. I have the stats up here. For example, in Poland, from 1991, 12% of women believe that they had legal and social rights in their country. Today, 52%, which isn't good enough, by the way, but 52% believe that. In Slovakia, 11% to 49%. In the Czech Republic, 15% to 44%. In Bulgaria, 20% to 40%. In Hungary, 37% to 50%. However, substantial minorities in each of, the nations surveyed, um, believe that women's rights remain unchanged. Why is that 52, not 100, right? Even though nearly 30 years have passed, and roughly a quarter more in Hungary, Slovakia, and Ukraine, and Poland, and Bulgaria, believe that women have the same rights now as they had under communism. Since 1991, the share of people saying women's rights have improved. Since the regime change has increased significantly in every country where trend data is available. However, few people, saw any improvement in women's social and legal rights immediately following the fall of communism. Additionally, I have another graph here, and at least half, really, in each surveyed country say a marriage is uh, where a marriage where really, both the husband and the wife have jobs and they both take care of the household is way more satisfying than one where only one member does that. In a lot of a lot more conservative societies, it tends to be the husband that does that. Publics in Sweden, France, and Spain are the most likely to believe, an egalitarian marriage is satisfying. And roughly 8 in 10 in Germany, the Netherlands, and Greece share this preference. And though preference for an egalitarian marriage is high in Central and Eastern Europe, roughly a quarter or more, in other countries like Hungary, and Poland, and other major countries, they don't hold that same belief, which is it demonstrates the progress that needs to be made. And remember, even though some of these numbers, you're going to see more encouraging numbers as we go on too, but that's still not enough because it's just the only reason it's encouraging is because it was really bad many years ago, and now it's improved recently. More movements, more progressivism in terms of social progressivism in many of these societies. Um, but still, there's still a lot, and we overlook this. Like I said earlier, the most important thing, your frame of mind. If you're listening to this in the states, things are still not good enough. They're not nearly as bad as they are in other countries, and that's why um, it can skew your view, and that's very important. Roughly, and by the way, an even more concerning stat: only 3 in 10, about 29% in Russia and 28% in Ukraine, believe that marriages where both the male and the female work and provide and take care are the best. Um, Another stat I have that's pretty interesting: the preference for traditional marriage roles. And this is basically saying the percent who prefer a marriage where the husband provides for the family and the wife takes care of the house and children. In 1991, for example, in France, 30% supported that. Today, 2019, 7%. In Germany, in 1991, 36% supported it. Today, in 2019, 15% support it. The highest percentage I can see in my graph here is in Lithuania. No, it's in the Czech Republic, where it's 34% today. But still, that's encouraging too. Um, and generally speaking, since 1991, preference for a marriage with traditional gender roles has dropped substantially in most countries. And this change over time is, especially pronounced in Central and Eastern European countries where, over half in most countries expressed a preference for, this type of marriage. And that's not the case anymore, which is, and it's dramatically not the case anymore because in many countries that number's under 10% now. Um, but even more important thing, by the way, is the next stat I have, which is younger adults are less likely, even less likely, to prefer marriage with the traditional roles. So this is basically going over the previous thing except with age breakdowns. So in the Czech Republic, 23% of 18 to 34-year-olds support a traditional marriage. 33% of 35 to 59-year-olds support a traditional marriage, and 47% of 60-plus-year-olds support a traditional marriage. Poland, same thing, 16%, 25 to 40. Italy, 16, 17, and then 33 for 60 plus. In the UK, which is pretty interesting. It's the only one I can see on the graph that's like this, but 21% in ages from 35 to 59 support the traditional marriage rules. Only 19 in the 60 plus, and that's actually the lowest 60 plus on the graph here. But basically, generally speaking, for everything other than the UK, the older you are, the more likely you are to have a preference for traditional marriage rules. And there's a pretty big gap between the ages. Um, in the US, for example, 15% of people support the traditional marriage rules, 24%, and that's from 18 to 34-year-olds, 24% of 60 plus support it. And, you know, pretty interesting is that Russia is actually the only country where the opposite pattern emerges. Roughly 32% of 18 to 34-year-olds support traditional marriage. 33% of 35 to 59-year-olds support traditional marriage. And for the 60-plus-year-olds, only 19 support it. Education is also related to preferences for, traditional marriage in the Czech Republic, Greece, the Netherlands, Hungary, Lithuania, Italy, Poland, Slovakia, the UK, Bulgaria, and Spain. And people with lower educational attainment in those countries are significantly more likely than those with a higher educational attainment to prefer traditional marriage. Next stat I have is with gender and employment. Most do not think that men who have really more right to a job than women when jobs are scarce. Um, for example, in Slovakia, 59% agree that men do not have more right to a job. 53% in Greece disagree. 51% in Poland disagree. 54% in Bulgaria disagree. 57% in Italy disagree. 84% in the UK disagree. That most do not think men have more right to a job. And that's another thing. Actually, I think I might have read the graph wrong because I was trying to figure out what the heck's going on here because I thought the UK and Spain were more progressive, and they are. It's basically flipped. So basically, it's not as I was really concerned seeing this graph, but Slovakia is the only country where a majority believe that men should have more of a right to a job than a woman if the job is scarce. Every other country disagrees. So the margins are higher. For example, Greece it's 53-46, and Sweden it's 92-7. They disagree. In the U.S., only 13% agree, just for comparison. And the view that men have more right to a job than women in tough economic times is a minority position, really, in pretty much all the countries that are polled here in the study. Um, However, significant chunks, many European countries do, express the opinion. In many Central and Eastern European countries, as well as Greece and Italy, where overall employment rates are, relatively low. Slovakia is actually the only country where a majority says men deserve preferential treatment when jobs are scarce. But 4 in 10 or more share this view in Italy, Bulgaria, Poland, Ukraine, Russia, and Greece. By comparison, fewer than a quarter in most Western European countries, as well as the U.S., think men have more right to a job than women during economic hardship. In Sweden, the European Union's most gender egalitarian country, only 7%, which is still 7%, but still. And one last study I have, so people with lower incomes say that men have more right to a job than women. So this is comparing incomes. So, um, and what it's showing is and the difference is basically ranging from 10 to 15% across most countries. And people with lower incomes are more likely to believe, 10 to 15% more likely to say that men should have that right to a job. So it's another thing. But thank you for listening to the podcast. That really brings us to the end. I wanted to expose some data. I wanted to talk some trends and look at some stuff that, to try and reveal still serious gender inequality that exists in Europe. There's definitely been progress, and I hope like the comparisons from 1991 to 2019 have helped. Um, I hope they would, but we'll see. And but we still there still needs to be more progress. There still needs to be more gender equality, and there needs to be less gender inequality because, as you can tell from the answers, there's still a significant chunk that firmly believe in or don't believe in progressive movements. So that's it. But thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope it was beneficial. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're listening on YouTube and drop a like to help with the YouTube algorithm. If you're listening on Spotify, you can follow our podcast and it'll always show up for you whenever I upload a new one. I'm uploading a new one, by the way, very soon. The next one's going to be pretty soon because I've done my research with all four of these episodes. Actually, it took the first one, whenever I'm uploading a series, like I'm doing, focusing now on gender inequality across different regions in the world and how cultures and religions played a role in that. But whenever I do a series like that, most of my research is up front with the first episode. Then after that, it gets easier and I can roll into it. So I don't think it'll be that long before I upload my next video or episode of the podcast. But yeah, stop rambling. Thank you for listening and goodbye.